Hi, my name's Jenny. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer, and today I'm going to talk to you about two projects from Australia that I've been involved in. I've only just recently moved back to Scotland, so these are two projects that I've been involved in until very recently. So the two projects are Urban Fabric, 3,000 acres. They're quite different projects and they take quite different approaches to how to use vacant spaces. I'll talk to you about the first, which is Urban Fabric, and that's a collective of people. And initially, when I moved to Australia, I would see a lot of vacant spaces around the place. I think when you've got fresh eyes in a new place, you notice these little pockets that aren't really being used for anything. And I wondered, what if we could actually use these spaces? I'd heard that there were a lot of creative people that perhaps didn't feel that they could show their artwork or their films in some of the more traditional galleries or spaces. So me and some friends set up a collective called Urban Fabric, and the idea was, what if we could really bring the community together and really showcase some of that great local talent whilst also activating these spaces. So Urban Fabric was born. We worked together a lot with local landowners, businesses, local community groups. We had a lot of volunteers who were all very much involved in creating these kind of activities for these spaces. And we really started prototyping. What can we do here that's really going to best showcase these artists, filmmakers, musicians' work? And we started off with outdoor cinema, as well as a few exhibition events in things like laneways and spaces which really were kind of lying dormant and not really being used. This is from that was from one of our first events, which was Secret Cinema. We called it Secret Cinema because really a lot of these spaces that we were interested in were these hidden nooks around the city that you might just walk straight past otherwise. And really the outdoor cinema events became a great way of prototyping how this was going to work, how we were going to bring the community together with the different skills of volunteers and really make something of these spaces, even if it was just for a very short time, because a lot of these vacant or underused spaces, perhaps a developer was about to start construction there in a few weeks' time, or they might only be around for a year. So we worked with really quite a wide variety of different places. This one, for example, it's actually a public park, but nobody was really using the space. It was a little cut through. It seemed really quite sketchy at night. There's a lot of perceived fear about the place. So what we did was worked with the local businesses, which actually were in this building here, local volunteers, and we had an outdoor cinema night of short films by more than 12 local filmmakers, and we also had an exhibition. This is also one of our cinema nights, but this time we tried it inside. This was one in Melbourne, so the weather isn't quite as favourable as up north, where the other events had been. So we ambitiously decided we were going to turn this warehouse into a cinema just for one night. We tried to make amphitheatre seating on a pretty much non-existent budget. We called in favours, we worked with friends, anyone we could get our hands on that would give us anything to be able to create this night out of nothing. And so that was really great, seeing what you can achieve if you get lots of people together. So it was a very kind of grassroots approach. So we also had musicians, we had an exhibition as well. We had this picture at the bottom left here is a local brewery, who kindly operated that out at their bar, out of our makeshift bar, which we'd made out of pallets and spray painted. So as you can see, it's a very bottom-up approach, you could say. But what was really great about the Urban Fabric Collective is that to date, we've had, these are not very impressive numbers, but if you bear in mind it's a handful of volunteers giving up their spare time on a budget of 300 quid at the bottom for all of these things. We have had 5 events, made 11 partnerships. We've showcased more than 63 local filmmakers and artists' work with more than 400 attendees. The other project that I wanted to speak about tonight is 3,000 acres, which is also based in Australia. It started in Melbourne about a year ago by some very inspiring people who are actually urban designers and urban planners at a company called Planosphere. And they had this great idea that, we have all this vacant space just sitting there. And there's also a few health problems at the moment to do with obesity and people not having access to that healthy food. What if we could transform these vacant spaces just like this, remove all the barriers, and instead build community, enable people to grow healthy food and meet each other at the same time? So about a year ago, funding was applied for successfully from Vic Health in Australia, and that really allowed the project to go forward. So that enabled a toolkit to be made for resources for communities. building of the website, which includes a map at the bottom there where people can plot a vacant space of land that they're interested in and meet people around that land. Also have a CEO employed for 3 days a week to enable to progress the project a bit more, and also start building prototype gardens. So this is me and the team designing and starting to think about how we were going to start building a prototype garden to really kind of test this process and see how we could help facilitate other community members doing this. So you can see we had quite a basic approach. We used IBC food containers to make wicking beds, and we used once we designed this kind of concept, we sent it to the developer Neo Metro to get their approval for us using what had been a car park for something like this. So this is the launch event of that first prototype garden, and that we had tutorials, we had lots of different speakers, and more importantly, the community could start meeting each other and start growing things together. So since building the first few prototype gardens, the project's gone forward, and we've now got 5 more upcoming gardens in Melbourne. There's now going to be 2,000 acres in Sydney, which is also based on the original idea by 596 acres in New York. Testing of the toolkit and resources, which is really important in allowing communities to break down those barriers, access that land, meet each other, and start growing. So just in summary, yes, there are lots of vacant spaces, and these have been 2 very different approaches in how we can use those. But really what it's all about is removing barriers, building partnerships to enable these things to happen, and empowering communities. Thanks very much.